Hi. Thanks for having me, Hamish. I'm the founder of kidsandclicks.com, which is a website that provides online safety news for parents. So we try to cover the latest social media apps and the latest information when it comes to digital parenting and what parents need to know about. And we also try to cover digital wellness for children and how to balance that when using technology and being in the physical world. Started this journey about 3 years back. Before that, I've been a social media consultant for about almost 10 years plus. But yeah, so this is where I am at with kidsandclicks.com. It's been featured in a couple of places like Internet Matters, Common Sense Media, and other organizations. So yeah.
Brilliant. And obviously, it seems like there's a lot of demand for this stuff at the moment, right? Have you seen your kind of readership grow over the last year, or certainly over the COVID period?
Definitely. I think since the start of the lockdown, since March of May, I would say maybe web traffics for certain keywords have actually doubled.
Yeah.
So keywords like screen addiction has gone up, digital detox for children have gone up. So certain social media apps like TikTok, OnlyFans, House Party, the search for these kind of apps have just gone up the roof since the start of the lockdown.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it seems that there seems to be ever proliferation of apps and platforms, and the job of parents and educators to keep up and keep informed, it seems to be almost as challenging because we don't necessarily see the upside. We just see our children or our students completely engaged in these kind of acronyms and apps that we don't really know what they are. And I think it's a real challenge, not only for kids to keep on top of it, but also for parents and educators. I'm a digital consultant, but I also work in a school as a digital strategist, and working with online learning, working with teachers to try to improve their offer really in terms of digital and remote teaching. So really, I suppose what I'd like to start with is what you see as the trends at the moment. So clearly COVID has caused this huge tech acceleration. We're seeing companies go online, we're seeing schools go online, we're seeing children and parents go online, we're seeing Zoom meetings replace normal meetings, and there's so much positive stuff here, but are we running a bit too fast? I know there's a huge concern with lots of parents as to whether we're ever going to be able to kind of row back from this, and we're not going to start seeing children given devices at 1 year old, 2 years old, coming into classrooms at nursery, being digital natives. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I mean, I think since the start of the COVID, I think parents and students as well, I think are being thrown into the deep end into using things that they would probably never have used before. So, for example, like Zoom meeting, for example, using Google Docs, uploading files, for homeworks and so on. So there is suddenly a lot of technical skills that I think for parents and for children as well that they have to learn. And I think definitely in the first few weeks as well, when it comes to when I see in our web traffic, I think a lot of parents were looking for information as to a Zoom guide, as in, how do you raise a hand in Zoom, or, the basic features of using all of this, because everything is very, very new. And, I think it requires time and to get adjusted to all of that. And, I think by now, students would be quite comfortable with it, parents would be quite comfortable with it, but the learning curve was definitely very steep at the beginning, because it was just suddenly they just have to know how to do this, and getting all of this in place is very, very difficult. Very big challenge, I think, for a lot of parents. And in terms of how we would come out of this, I think it'd be very interesting to see how schools would actually implement technology into the classroom, how it will be integrated. Now that children are learning all these skills, now that teachers and schools are being able to recognize, the advantages and the opportunities of it, is that how can we then explore this even further for the benefit of children? Obviously, we want them to be in a physical environment, have that social interaction, but we mustn't forget this as well, that, it took a time, it took a lot of learning curve. Let's not let it drop. Let's continue with that momentum, but use it in the right way. And that is going to be a challenge as to how to find that right balance, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because ICT in schools has really taken a back seat over the last 5 years. Been a big drive in terms of computing, but those basic ICT skills haven't been there. And suddenly, almost by osmosis, everyone in the country has picked up these really important skills. And I think some of the positives for me is seeing things like children being able to book things online, being able to schedule things, being able to pick up digital skills for life, which have never been in school curriculums or wouldn't be taught in primary schools. But for children to be able to check the train line, or to be able to book something, or to be able to help their mum with the online shop, or to be able to order things, I think is a really positive thing that's coming out of this, because they are skills which every child in the country is going to need, and potentially they've had much more exposure to it in the last few months, which I think is a very good thing. In terms of just touching on the parenting thing as well, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and certainly speaking to lots of people, is this idea of of trying to educate children in different year groups, children of different abilities, having multiple homeworks coming from teachers who are trying to do the best thing for their kids, but actually as parents feeling really overwhelmed because you want to help your children, but you're not a trained teacher, and even if you are a trained teacher, teaching, say, a year 3 class, a year 6 class, and then a year 8 class is so different. And we're just expecting this this nation of parents to be able to do this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not just about, teaching children. I think, parents as well face the struggle of having to do their work as well, and balancing that work life and, children's online classes. And from the Facebook parenting group that I run, I see that, there will be a group of parents that have just completely dropped online learning because it has
Yeah,
just become too much. And they believe, look, even if their child misses out on the 6 months, they have learned and gathered other skills in the physical world, whatever they were doing, that they will be able to catch up on the 6 months. But there is also the argument that teachers are putting in a lot of effort into this online
right.
learning, because even for teachers it is, it is a lot of work, it is a lot of learning curve for them as well. And a lot of parents respect that effort being put in by teachers, and they try to keep up with it. It is not going to be 100%. This is almost a year where we're just testing it all out and seeing how it plays out. So again, it's a struggle for teachers, it's a struggle for parents. So
Yeah.
I think the only thing we can do is just be a bit kinder to ourselves, that we've given ourselves the chance to actually explore all of this.
Yeah. It's really interesting what you just said there, because I think that's absolutely true. But with the point you touched on about the social side of education, and children going to school to learn those kind of social interactions, and from young children learning to put their hand up to older children, and the kind of peer group pressures and the peer group positives that come from kind of teenage years. Um, it kind of drives towards this social media thing, because what we're seeing is children developing identities online, changing their identities online, and actually sometimes there's a lot less risk of doing that online. So rather than going into a physical space, whether it's a town centre and, I don't know, getting a tattoo or a crazy haircut, or whatever it is, actually you can experiment with these identities online, often with less harm. Now, I'm not discounting the fact that obviously there are significant risks out there in terms of online safety, but there's part of me that feels, well, actually, maybe if they're getting some of this socialization by engaging well with social media, is that such a bad thing? And I wonder what your thoughts on that are.
Well, I think, like what you've said, the key word there is socializing well on social media, and having sort of, it should be age appropriate is, I think, the other challenge as well, because a lot of children who are, for example, say below the age of 13 years old, are using social media when they shouldn't be on it.
Yeah,
And it's not just about experimenting with their own digital identity, but rather understanding the content that they will be exposed to, and the influences that they follow, how they are going to be shaping sort of their thoughts, sort of their identity online. So there's a lot of consideration to think about when we talk about socializing online, especially using social media. I guess the one thing that I would like to point out when it comes to this is that understanding where the age 13 years old as well come from. It's COPPA, which is a Law on Consumer Online Privacy Protection Act from the US, which
Yeah.
means that below the age of 13 years old, social media companies cannot collect children's information, which also means that that law of 13 years old has nothing to do with content of
No,
the app
it's about
itself.
data,
So
isn't it?
yes, so again, I think we need to be very careful when we talk about socializing online. One of the big things that happened since the lockdown is the use of OnlyFans app, which is an app that pay content creators for creating that content on the app. But currently, the app is being used a lot in the adult industry, in the porn industry, because people can't go out and work, and they're using the app and they get paid by other people. And it has seen a surge since the lockdown. And there's been a report, I can't remember by which paper it was when it first came out, that younger children are selling nude images on app, even on Twitter, using hashtag like nude for sales and stuff like that. So again, these things, we want to be very, very careful when we talk about the use of social media and children, because I think making sure that they're mature and responsible enough to understand how to use it for their benefit is what is important here.
Absolutely, and I think that balance between risk and reward, and how you teach good digital behaviours and good kind of digital citizenship. My view is that people like Common Sense Education, Google Applied Digital Skills, Google Applied Digital Citizenship stuff seems to be some of the best stuff out there at the moment. But again, it's keeping on top of the ever proliferating app library. And I saw a figure from TechCrunch. It was just last month, I think it was, which they said there's a 40% increase year on year in terms of the number of app downloads and the number spent in the App Store. And that's just extraordinary when you think that it's already up at, I think it's 200 billion, something like that, like absolutely extraordinary figures. And it just seems to be exponential at the moment, clearly accelerated by the COVID crisis. So I think that's certainly a bit sobering when you think the scale of the thing. We think about our own children or our own classes, but actually this is a kind of worldwide issue which really needs addressing. I would say probably at national and international level. Do you have a view on things like a digital strategy in terms of like whether the government should be leading this? Because it seems that their forays into this stuff so far haven't been particularly successful. Do you think that's what's needed, a steer from government, or do you think it's actually beyond that already?
Oh, I think definitely. I think that there need to be a lot more education for children when it comes to this. I think it's not just government alone. I think this is parents, so the tech industry, the government, they all play a very important role in ensuring children's online safety. But when it comes to the government's role, I think it's being a bit more proactive in not just sort of having this sort of a tick in a box for school, or we've had someone talk about online safety.
Yeah.
This should be part of their education system, because this is going to be their future. We should look at it in terms of how we teach our child about maths or science.
Absolutely,
Or basic life skills. This is an extension of that. Even
Right.
probably this is just as important as all of that, because this is what they're going to be using in the future. And we need to build that sort of digital skill in children from a very young age. I think school play an important role in making this happen. Parents play a very crucial role in being the good, right role model for their children. And even tech industry, they should be held accountable in making sure that they create an environment safe enough for children to be at. And so I think a lot of people play a very important role in obviously making this a reality.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think there's many stakeholders in the industry, and I think that you're absolutely right. The biggest the biggest driver of successful digital skills is role modeling of parenting, and actually seeing their parents engage and not be sucked into the phone the whole time. And I'm as guilty as it is the next person, but
Yeah.
we work in this industry. That's my excuse anyway. But I think you're absolutely right there, and that the schools and nurseries and educational institutions have a role to play, as do the big tech companies. And I certainly think that 13 threshold that you've just spoken about does need to be reviewed, because actually I think it needs to be much more graded than that, and it needs to build from a lower level, because we need to accept the reality that young children are using these platforms, and they're not using them because they're full of harms. They're using them because they're fun, and those big tech companies make them fun. They are full of dopamine hits and addictive behavior drivers. And you think, well, the kids must be getting something out of this if they want to keep doing it. Which kind of brings me
Yeah.
to this point about pacification as well, and to what extent you think devices are used as essentially a pacifier. Is the word that Americans often use. But do you think there's a degree of kind of social etiquette with that, in terms of children being on screens, or children being given something to quieten them down? Or do you think this argument is probably as as old as the hills, and we've always been doing it with magazines or whatever?
Yeah, I'm just as guilty for that. I give my child screen just so I can get some work done at home.
Yeah, yeah,
Here's some Netflix show, please. I need
yeah,
15 minutes of my time. But to be honest with you, there is no guilt for me in doing that, because I think the conversation should move beyond sort of screen time
yeah,
towards content that we give our child. So I think the main thing is, like, look, as a parent, we, especially in times like this, we're all just trying to make it work. We're all taking it one day at a time. The one thing that we can do for our child right now is not to sort of stress about screen time, but rather to think about the content that they are
yeah,
consuming.
absolutely.
So I guess I'm a bit more careful in terms of the content rather the time that she spent watching TV. Obviously, it doesn't mean
Sure,
that I leave her with her for 3 hours,
sure,
but
sure,
at least the half an hour she's on it. I know she's watching a BBC program on, on
sure,
kindness or whatever it is with
sure,
a
sure.
theme, and I'm like, okay, if she gets something out of this, good. If she doesn't, she's just entertained, and there's no harm being done.
Yeah.
So, I think, yeah, I think just stop feeling guilty about screen time as long as you know what your child is consuming.
I think that's right. And when I talk to secondary age teachers and students, it's always about that idea of what is actually going on there. What are the meaningful interactions that are happening? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And getting that sense of self-identity online is important, and cultivating it, and getting rid of the old one and bringing in the new one, and letting it grow with you as you grow. And actually modeling some of that stuff. So when we talk about digital citizenship as we get a bit older, like modeling fake news and modeling profiles that have gone wrong, or people who have been catfished, or stuff that's gone wrong, and the multitude of politicians and celebrities who have to row back on things they've said, or lose jobs and all those kind of things. So actually not seeing it as something which is abstract, but seeing it as something which is really real, and trying to provide learning opportunities that are framed in reality, rather than, oh, we've got to do a bit on online safety, so go and do that and let's move on. It has to be contextualized. I think that's really important for this stuff to stick. And if it's going to be contextual, then it needs to be local as well. So who are the people doing it? What are the topics in the news, or the topics on social media that are trending? Let's make the education that's relevant to that, rather than something which was written a year ago, or even last month,
Yeah,
which may be
absolutely.
irrelevant.
I would say, just going back a little bit, and while we are talking about this, one of the advantages sort of after the whole, this whole lockdown, the advantages of the good things that has happened out of this when it comes to online parenting for children is that children are becoming very good to become scam spotters.
Yeah.
They are learning because there's a lot of scams, a lot of fake news. I've seen my 7-year-old nephew telling my mother-in-law that this is a scam and you're reading fake news. And this is something because they're just being online and they're learning more about it, and it's becoming a bit more natural for them than just being told about this. So it's another skill, a good skill that they're learning while all of this is happening. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So we're picking it up. It's good to have all that positivity coming through, because generally what we hear from, when we talk about online safety and we talk about the lockdown, is the risks and the negatives and the bad impacts on children. But actually, I absolutely agree with you. I think there are lots of upsides in terms of pushing them forward. So in terms of pushing with that, where would you suggest parents go if they, or teachers go, if they are interested in educating themselves a bit more on this and not just taking anecdotal evidence, but looking at perhaps a bigger picture or looking for reliable sources? Because there is so much stuff out there. What are your
Yeah.
perhaps three, go-to places where you find things?
For if you want to look into, for example, age appropriate video games, I would say go to pgi.org.
Yeah,
They rate games, and it'd be a good source to know whether the
yeah,
game will be appropriate for your child or not.
yeah.
If you want to look into sort of reviews of a particular app, I would say Common
Common
Sense Media.
sense.
They've got
Yeah,
very good resources there as well. Internet Matters, again, if you're looking for more general information on internet safety, cyberbullying, and all of that. And of course, you can always check out Kids and Clicks. We try to keep up to date with whatever latest
yeah,
is
yeah.
happening.
I
But
think for me,
um,
out of that list, I completely agree with you on all of those. I think that one of the benefits of Internet Matters, because a lot of these are kind of quasi-government agencies and they're non-commercial, is that they've got a platform guide for each of the devices and each of the home broadband providers. So they'll tell parents how you can turn your parental controls on and how the device works for each one. So if you've, for example, got a 7-year-old with an iPhone or a 13-year-old with an Android, or you're worried about TikTok, and it'll just say, right, this is the 3 things you can do to kind of give a bit of oversight, give a bit of supervision, which is really what we want. But look, Parven, it's been so great talking to you, and thank you for your time. I'm sorry we couldn't do this in person in Bury St Edmunds, but I hope next year we will be able to. And I would like to recommend fully Kids and Clicks to anyone out there who is interested in digital parenting and finding out a little bit more. And I think it's really great work you're doing. So thank you, and please keep it up.
all right, thank you. Thanks for having me, Hamish.